Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to the James Kennedy podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you all had an awesome week and enjoyed the last episode with the great Robin Ford. And boy, do we have a good one for you guys today. I'm not going to waffle too long on this one because I want to get into this conversation as much as you do. So I'm just going to say one thing before we start. Why the hell have you not subscribed to the podcast? I know you haven't because I know how many people listen to this thing and I can see how many people have subscribed. So come on, man, do me a solid. Help your brother out, man. I'm giving you the good stuff here. Click that subscribe, click that follow, click that share if you're feeling crazy. And I, in return, will promise to keep these things coming. Also, I think a lot of people don't realize that this podcast is available on every platform, even YouTube. There's no video, but you can still listen to it on YouTube as well. And it's also available in all usual places, Spotify, Apple, and wherever else you get your podcasts. So, just pick your evil giant tech company of choice and it'll be there. Right, okay, well I said I wasn't going to waffle, so let's get down to the main event of the day because we are joined today by the neuroscientist and author Dr. Joseph Jebelli, whose latest book, The Brain at Rest, is a fascinating and important exploration of what happens to our brains, our health, and our lives when we simply stop. I think I probably need to hear this more than most, so I personally cannot wait to tuck into this one and welcome onto the show the brilliant Dr. Joseph Jebelli. How are you doing, man?
Hi, James. I'm good. Good to be with you.
Thanks so much for doing this, man. We really appreciate it. And as I said in the intro, I am somebody that definitely needs to hear what you've got to say today because I am a chronic non-stopper. But before we jump into the subject at hand today, could you give the listeners a brief overview of who you are, what you do, and the sort of things that you're involved in?
Yeah, so I'm a neuroscientist by training. So I did my PhD in cell and molecular neuroscience at University College London, and then I worked as a postdoctoral researcher in America at University of Washington in Seattle. And again, it was very cell and molecular, looking at basically brain diseases and looking at like a bunch of different brain diseases like ataxia and Parkinson's disease and multiple sclerosis, lots of different things. And I've spent the last couple of years writing quite a lot about neuroscience. And so I wrote my first book about Alzheimer's disease and, our sort of humanity's kind of hunt for an effective treatment for Alzheimer's disease. And I wrote a book about brain evolution as well. And then I started to become really interested in rest and the neuroscience of rest. Basically for two reasons. So it was kind of personal and professional, really. So I realized that I was overworking myself. I say in the book that, I was going through a phase where I was going into the lab like 6 or 7 in the morning. I was, working on experiments all day long, mentoring students, writing grants. And then I would leave the lab at like 7 or 8 o'clock at night.
Wow.
And I would go straight to a coffee shop and I would work on my first book or a grant or something. And because I was basically in this phase where you just think, the faster you run, the more you'll achieve. Like the harder you work. If you just outwork other people, you'll get what you want, right? And unsurprisingly, my health started to really take a hit. So my memory started suffering. I was less creative, and I just started to get quite unwell. And so I decided to kind of step back a little bit and not work as hard. Still work hard. I'm still like a hardworking, ambitious person, but I just decided to stop overworking myself. And it was also because I'd seen what had happened with overwork with my parents as well. So I talk a little bit about my dad and my mum and my dad in the book because they've both worked so hard and have basically worked to the point of burnout. And my father now lives with major depressive disorder as a result. My mum, her blood pressure is so high, the GP asks her for almost daily blood pressure recordings. She's technically in like a hypertensive emergency, like all the time because of her blood pressure. And so I started to basically, it was interesting because as soon as I started to step back a little bit, I noticed not just that my health returned, but things like my memory and my creativity and my problem solving. And I thought, that's really interesting. What is it about rest that is having these really profound impacts on the brain? And that's when I started to look into what rest is for your brain, true rest, and what it does. And that's when I just, it's just an absolutely extraordinary area of neuroscience, which I just explore in the book.
Ah, man, well, you've got me fascinated already. I mean, it's such a shame, isn't it, in our society these days, in our culture, the message is that of, crushing it. And as you said, outworking the competition and being a winner and all that sort of stuff. Like it's a trophy, if you working yourself to death, it's almost like a badge of honor, It's such a strange place to have ended up. And I'm sure we're going to get into all that and so much more because I've got so many things I want to ask you. So to open that up, what would you say is the central overarching message or main discovery of your book, The Brain at Rest?
So basically, the book is about the fact that we have our understanding of work and rest completely upside down. So we think that when we rest, that our brain is kind of like a muscle and that it's powering down and we're not really doing anything, and that taking time off work and resting too much is kind of lazy, it's indulgent, it's unprincipled, it's even maybe a bit reckless. But the precise opposite is true. So basically, when you rest, your brain activates a network that we call the default network. And we now know that when you activate your default network with rest, you improve your intelligence, your creativity, your memory, your problem-solving abilities. It even lowers your chances of developing things like depression and dementia. And so it's such an exciting area of neuroscience because it's only really been discovered in the past few years. Like the default network itself was discovered in 2001, but only in the past few years have we really begun to understand that actually people are succeeding in life not despite their inactivity, but because of their inactivity.
Wow.
Right? Because the default network, it occupies 20% of your brain, right? Whereas your working brain network, what we call the executive network, that actually only occupies about 5% of the brain. So, there are so many cognitive benefits to be had from resting our brain, and that's what I'm trying to get across in the book. And true rest for the brain is not like looking at your phone or binging on Netflix. Those things feel restful mostly because they're just a distraction from what you were just doing.
Right.
Like you're in the office, you're doing your work, and you look at your phone, and it feels restful because you're not looking at your work anymore. But it's a trick. It's masquerading as rest. That's not true rest for the brain. So true rest for the brain is things like staring out of the window and letting your mind wander. It's things like going for a walk, especially in green space. Green space has like a whole bunch of really profound benefits on the brain that we can discuss. It's things like taking a 30-minute nap, which we now know actually enlarges your brain, and it enlarges your brain by 15 cubic centimeters, which, to put into context, is the volume of a small plum. So it's really big. And it's things like taking more breaks throughout the day. It's things like, engaging in more play, embracing things like silence, which we know stimulates things like BDNF, a protein that really helps sprout new neurons and helps defend you against things like Alzheimer's.
Wow.
So, so these are truly restful things to the brain, and they activate this default network. And it's this default network that I really want to encourage people to activate more. There's a reason why, you're working on a problem and you can't get it, and you get exhausted and burnt out, and then you think, sod it, I'm just going to go for a walk. And then 5-10 minutes on your walk, the solution just pops into your head. That's your default network busily working on the problem without you even thinking about it.
Right.
So it's the book is basically, about what rest is for the brain and why it's so beneficial, and that actually, rest is the secret to sustained productivity, not work. It's rest that is driving not just your best thinking abilities, but your best long-term productivity and your best work.
Oh, that's fascinating stuff, man. And like the fact that it's actual tangible physical evidence that you can look at on a screen must be pretty mind-blowing, no pun intended. But what about something that's just occurred to me whilst I was listening to you then? What about rumination, though? Because all that happens to me when I start, daydreaming or looking out of a window is I start ranting with somebody in my head, start arguing, I start going over old things and getting anxious about future things that haven't happened yet. It's very unrelaxing. So I think that's why I personally tend to keep myself so busy all of the time, is to sort of block out that internal asshole, Mm-hmm. Is that a separate conversation, or does that tie in somehow with what we're talking about here?
No, that's a really good question. So basically, all of the research into mind wandering and daydreaming it explores all of the positive aspects, but there is this side to it, as you say, about rumination, and I get this too, right? Like, so I'll stare out the window for a couple of minutes and let my mind wander. But sometimes if I'm doing it for a bit too long, or if it's just not the right time of day, or if something else is bothering me maybe in the day, like I'll start ruminating and overthinking. And so what I would say about that is, if you find that your mind wandering and you start ruminating, just stop doing it and go and do something else.
Right.
Like, because it's not, I don't want people to avoid the benefits of mind wandering, the cognitive benefits of daydreaming, but out of fear of rumination happening. If rumination does start to happen and you start overthinking, you start getting anxious, then just go and do something else,
right,
and just come back to it at another time. Like, I find that so if I'm having a bath, for instance, I find that I mind wander in like quite a positive and productive way, I think.
Right.
So I think it's just about finding the conditions that you yourself find enjoyable to have a sort of positive daydreaming experience.
Right. Love it. Yeah. And well, I totally agree with you about walking as well, because for some reason, if I go out walking in nature, I'm lucky I live in South Wales. There's lots of it around.
Lovely.
And as a creative person as well, exactly like you said, I can go out for a walk and 10 minutes later, the thing that I'm not actively thinking about anymore, the solution will just come. So I totally get that myself. On the flip side of that, I also do experience what you described as well with the burnout. I'm someone that pushes myself very, very hard. I really never get a day off or any time off ever, really. I won't let myself. I'm always juggling and doing something. I'm self-employed, so there's always that pressure to, never take your eye off the ball for a second. And every now and then, every few weeks, I hit a point where I'm just completely and utterly burnt out. My memory starts going. I'm struggling to find the right words. I start getting really narky and nasty and, depressed. I start hating myself, hating the world. It's pretty grim, And whether I want to or not, a self-imposed kind of lockdown almost happens against my will. I'm just so exhausted that I end up just hiding away for a day or two, just kind of doing nothing. And I'm starting to learn now the pattern that after a day or two of just doing nothing, the fog suddenly starts to lift. I catch up on my sleep. I just watch mindless crap on the telly and I sit and stare and I daydream. And it's not intentional, but I do know now from habit that after 2 days of doing that, I'll start to feel so much better. My optimism comes back. My faith in humanity comes back. My sense of possibility comes back. Is all of that, the good and the bad stuff, because of what you're describing?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's lots of really interesting things there. So the thing about doing nothing is it's not like meditation. So meditation is all about a focused, very much focused on the present, right? Focusing on things like your breathing, and it's a very focused and engaged exercise. This is far more effortless than that.
Right.
Doing nothing, and so I think the way to think about this is when you actually look at the neuroscience of work as well as the neuroscience of rest. So the reason you feel so bad when you're overworking is because overwork does do loads of really bad things to the brain. So one of the things it does is that it actually thins your frontal cortex in the same way that aging does. So it literally makes your brain older than it is. It also shrinks the hippocampus, the brain region really important for memory, which is why you struggle with things like short-term memory and working memory. It enlarges a region called the amygdala, which is really important for our fight or flight response. So that's why, overworked people are often very much on edge, very anxious, very tense. And interestingly, so psychologically, overwork is basically broken down into these 3 stages. It starts off with just dissatisfaction. So, you're not happy with your work, but that's kind of a manageable feeling. So you just get on with it. But if you ignore that signal, it then moves on to cynicism. And that's where you basically just don't care about your job anymore. It's just something you've got to do. And I think a lot of people are at that stage. And if you ignore that without taking much more rest, it then moves into the phase of dehumanization. And that's the phase that's very much a kind of emotional hardening, a complete detachment from your colleagues, from your friends and family. It's where you just feel really angry, really grouchy. You have feelings of dread and anxiety, depression, and incompetence as well.
Right.
And you sort of walk around and it's almost like you wear those feelings like skin, like they've just always been there. And if you ignore that, what that then basically leads to all of the neurobiological damage associated with overwork. And it's really interesting. They've done these fascinating longitudinal studies in Scandinavia, and they've shown that once the symptoms of overwork set in, it can actually take your brain up to 3 years to recover. So 3 years for your brain to return to its baseline ability to solve cognitive problems, cognitive tasks. So, I would argue that we're all somewhere along that 3 year spectrum of overwork. And so, when you say, okay, enough's enough, and you take time out and you go and sit in the park, not only are you preventing all of that damage from happening and reversing much of it, but you're engaging your resting brain, your default network. And so that's restoring and replenishing your memory and your problem solving abilities. So like being in green space as an example, we know that when you spend time in nature and green spaces, like just a park, your creativity and problem solving ability goes up by 50%.
Wow.
Your memory recall goes up by 20%. And a part of that, we think, is because when you're in a green space, your brain waves essentially shift from these very busy and anxious beta waves to much more daydreaming, calming, and reflective alpha waves, and even meditative theta waves. So, and another part of the reason that we think that's true as well is because nature abounds with what psychologists call soft fascinations. So these are things that just hold your attention in an effortless way. There's a reason why when you sit on a park bench and just watch the rustling of the leaves, or you're at the beach and you look at the lapping of the waves, those things hold your attention in a very effortless way. And when you contrast that to what psychologists call hard fascinations, these are things like your phone, LED billboards, train announcements, bosses, deadlines, all of those things just lead to cognitive fatigue and overwork for your brain. So yeah, like exactly when you say I've had enough and I'm taking a day off to relax in the park, that's exactly what you're doing. You're activating your resting brain, and you're getting all of the cognitive benefits and all of the health benefits of that as well. So it's not, so many people say to me that they feel guilty, and I just say, well, that's productivity guilt. That's the guilt that has come from our society telling you that you should equate your value and worth as a human being with your economic output, right?
Yeah.
And it's, that's a hard thing to let go of, but you have to let go of it because it's killing you. Like, it literally is killing you. 745,000 people a year now are dying of overwork. In Japan, they even have a word for it. They call it karoshi.
Yeah.
And so you have to let go of that guilt and actually understand that it's not just your body that's resting, your brain is resting. And by resting, it's not powering down, it's powering up, and it's doing loads of really important things.
Yeah, there's almost like a very interesting irony there then, isn't there? It's like if you want to crush it and be super productive and all that stuff, then actually you need to be resting more.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like one of the key things that I want to get across to people as well, because I think I think it's easy it can be easy to misunderstand the message. Like, when you're doing nothing, your brain's doing a lot of something. And that we know from like a mountain of research now that having more rest, taking your work-life balance a lot more seriously, it massively improves your long-term productivity.
Right.
And because we're in this hustle, overwork culture, all we're doing is prioritizing short-term productivity at the expense of long-term productivity. And so if you want true sustainable long-term productivity, you have to rest your brain a lot more.
Amen to that. Yeah, beautifully put. Is there a ratio then? Does it depend on the person? Does it depend on the circumstances? Or have you found something in the studies that prove that there is some kind of ratio between active brain engagement to this soft focus stuff, sort of rest that you're talking about? Is it half an hour in the day? Is it much more than that? Is there a ratio? Does it depend?
So, I mean, it depends basically, because there are so many different ways to rest your brain, and they all have slightly different benefits. They all seem to activate the default network. The interesting thing about the default network is it's kind of an all or nothing phenomenon. Once one part of the default network is active, the rest of it will often activate as well, which is great because it means that you can do something restful like going for a walk and it'll activate your default network, but you can also mind wander and it will activate your default network. But, each individual type of rest also seems to have slightly different benefits for the brain. And some of this is still obviously being fleshed out by neuroscientists. But we know like a 30-minute nap in the day, as I said, grows your brain by the volume of a small plum. We know that people who take breaks throughout the day. So if you try, for instance, the Pomodoro technique, where it's 25 minutes of work and then 5 minutes of rest, that your cognitive abilities improve and your long-term productivity improves. We know that there seems to be, people who have lots of micro breaks throughout the day, like 5-10 minutes every hour, for instance, instead of just, one slightly longer break in the day, that will actually have more cognitive benefits, and it'll be better for your resting brain than ignoring those micro breaks and just having, a half an hour to an hour break in the day.
Right.
So I suppose it's more about, there isn't an exact ratio. I think that it's more about just understanding that we are massively overworking. We're massively overusing our executive network, our brain's working network, and we're massively underusing the default network, the resting brain network. And so we need to basically like completely restore that balance. And so we just need to take rest a lot more seriously. We need a lot more of it. I mean, if I had a magic wand, I would put us all on the 4-day work week straight away, because we've like so many studies have been done on this now that show a huge trial in Iceland. Like it shows that at worst productivity stays the same, at best it massively improves.
Right.
And it's like, when you think about it, it totally makes sense. I mean, one of my favorite studies where they looked at consultants, for instance, and they showed that they couldn't tell the difference between people who like worked 80 hours a week and people who just pretended to work. Like so much of our time is spent just presenteeism. You're there because it looks good, but you're not actually doing any really productive work.
Yeah.
And so, I used to work, I don't know what, like 8, 10, 12 hours sometimes a day. And, it's just, I wasn't actually getting that much done. So now, for instance, I'll work really hard for like 5 to 6 hours a day, for instance, but I'll get a lot more done than I did when I was just grinding out with ridiculous hours.
Right.
And so I think it's more about just taking on board all of the different types of things that are really restful to your brain and taking a lot more time off as well.
Love it. Love it. Well, man, just listening to this is making my shoulders relax. The idea that it's okay for me to, switch off for 5 minutes. What do you do? Do you have a something that works for you, or does it depend on how busy you are?
Yeah. So I take a lot of breaks throughout the day, like definitely a lot more than I used to. So like, I'll work quite hard for like half an hour to 45 minutes, but then I will just like chill out for 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay.
And I never used to really do that. I'm a big fan of going for walks, I have to say. So I will just go for a walk in my neighborhood. I'm quite lucky because I'm in Islington, which isn't actually known for having that much green space, but there is a small park nearby, and there's also like a really small woodland like behind us, and it's like protected. It's quite small, but so I have a little place I can go forest bathing.
Nice.
I can take my son, and we can just spend some time in nature. So I'll try and get sort of 20 minutes of green space in a park or in a forest each day. So I do now also try and do the 30-minute nap, even though I was never a napper, right? So it's interesting because before, if you said to me, I'll take a 30-minute nap in the day, I'd be like, there's no way I can do that.
I ain't got time for that, yeah.
Right? So, and that's because like you do have a genetic predisposition to that. So that study was looking at a lot of data from the UK Biobank, and it was looking at genetic data. It was really interesting, as well as brain size data. But it was interesting because they basically found that people are either genetic nappers or genetic non-nappers. But even if you're a genetic non-napper, so genetically you're just not predisposed to particularly want a 30-minute nap in the day, even then you'll still reap the same cognitive neurobiological benefits of the nap. So I don't know if I'm a genetic napper or non-napper, but I still try and get that 30-minute nap in. Like I can't always get it in, but I will try and get it in, and I do feel better as a result of that.
Right.
And I think I think one of the bigger things that I do as well is like, again, so I mean, I've always been a bit of a daydreamer. Like I will just like randomly stare at like a mark on the wall and just spend a few minutes just thinking about nothing. But now I know actually it's doing my brain a lot of good. Um, so what else do I do? I take a lot more baths now as well than showers.
Love it.
So
Yeah.
like baths are really good for your brain, really good for default network activity, for daydreaming, also just really good for like your blood pressure and your stress levels, and like also really good for like your parasympathetic nervous system. Like there's all these really strong benefits of having a bath. And if you have a bath actually just before you go to bed, there are so many studies showing that you have much better sleep, much deeper and more restorative sleep. So I'll basically, yeah, I sort of try and, I mean, what else? I suppose I also try and get more. I mean, I've always been a bit like this anyway. Like micro moments of play throughout your day seem to be really good for your brain. So because when you think about play, like the neuroscience of play is really interesting. Because what is play? Play is it's imaginative, it's open ended, it's unstructured, it's task off, crucially. And so all of these things are default network functions. They're the things that your resting brain absolutely loves. So, I try and spend more time throughout my day being more playful, which now that I've got a baby boy is a lot easier to do. So that's great. But also just not feeling that guilty about taking rest. I mean, I really used to suffer with a lot of productivity guilt. And I think that was just part of my upbringing as well, because my parents have always been really hard workers. My parents, they're quite old fashioned hard workers.
Right.
I'm still, I'm to this day, I'm still trying to convince my mum about the neuroscience of rest. So, I basically was like raised to think of rest as like a luxury.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I'll try and So there's lots of like tools and techniques that I discuss in the book. I try to do every day myself.
That's amazing. Well, I'm going to make a completely uneducated assumption here that we used to do a lot of those things perhaps before the digital age, before life started moving at warp speed, when there were fewer options for things to do. You might work without a nap during the day, but then once your work was finished at 5 o'clock, whatever, that was kind of it for the day, But now we got these damn things, these phones that are, with us. We're checking them every 2 seconds. It's constant stimulation to the brain 24/7. Am I right in that assumption? Is this a problem that's getting worse because of the times we live in, and is likely to keep getting worse?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, you're spot on. And that is exactly right. And it is getting worse. So, I mean, we basically have this always on mentality now. So you finish your day, but because of your smartphone, you're still checking your emails, right? You're seeing work emails. You're thinking, oh, well, even though it's the end of the day, this, I need to reply to that. So often you reply to it. You still often get emailed by your boss on the weekend, something which I think is actually illegal in the EU, but not here for some ridiculous reason. And so, we have this always on mentality because of our phones, but we've also lost the kind of heritage of rest, because, I mean, I do remember a time when, because I remember when I was in my teens, and I think even a little bit early 20s, smartphones weren't really that big a thing. So it was still the days of like the Nokia 3210. So you just had text messaging and Snake. I really miss those days.
Yeah, me too.
You had to actually sit down at your computer and, to see the news, for instance.
Yeah.
I mean, now I'll read the news in the morning, but then I won't read it for the rest of the day, because it's just so bad for your brain. And it's just, we've so as well as the smartphones, we've lost this. People used to be able to just sit down on a park bench, and just look at the trees, look at the grass, sit in your garden, and just let your mind wander. I think we've sort of lost that, and I definitely
they'd be taking a picture of stuff from the park bench,
yeah,
and Instagramming it.
Yeah, exactly, right, exactly. And it's really sad. I think it's really sad, especially when it comes to children. Like I do remember a time when you would see children just like in the park, they'd be on the bench, they'd be running around.
Yeah.
And it's like now it's the tablets, it's the phones, it's just, so there's a heritage of rest that we've lost, as well as this always on culture. And I think it's not just about like digitally decluttering. It's not just about, because we all now basically know that phones are, we're spending way too much time on them. It's not good for a whole bunch of reasons. It's really bad for our attention span and all of this stuff. But what we don't know enough about is just all of the cognitive gains that come from rest, that come from true rest for your brain. Because when you stare at your phone, you're training your brain's distraction rather than its reflection. You're not allowing the brain to have to generate true, like, self-generated inner thought, essentially.
Interesting, right?
And so you're self-generated thought.
It's receiving content rather than creating it. So even though it feels like you're relaxing because you're just doom scrolling, you're switched off, you're not really thinking about anything, but your brain isn't like a child running around a park with free abandon, doing its own thing. It's still receiving. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. No, that's like the perfect way to put it. It's not. There's no. I would argue that self-generated thought is becoming essentially an endangered species, because we're just always on our phones. And that's another thing that comes from just allowing your brain true rest, from just sitting down and admiring nature and letting your mind wander and going for a walk in the forest. That's when your best ideas are going to come to you. That's when your default network is going to do its thing and give you the most creative insights into whatever it is that you want to do. We have to, our brains have evolved for the default network to come up with the solutions to really complex problems by letting our brain rest, not just by being locked into work emails and on our phones and just constantly focusing on tasks. And I don't know, I mean, it's kind of strange that we just think of like task on things, so work, as the thing that's really productive, and that something that's task off is not productive. Like I've been thinking more and more about it, and the more you think about it, the more you think, well, like why do we think of it as something that's lazy and indulgent? And I keep coming back to, okay, it's the lack of scientific understanding, and it's the culture that we've been programmed by. And I mean, I think those are the main reasons, but it's sort of, I feel the more I think about it, the more sinister I feel that the cultural influence has been, because it's quite hard to break out of that and to start to realize that actually your brain is doing a heck of a lot when you rest.
Oh man, it's such powerful information, and so simple as well. I mean, surely the easiest thing to do is to do nothing, right? And it says a lot about our culture right now that doing nothing is so difficult. I'm going to sort of take a curveball on this. I don't want to get political or anything like that, but I blame everything on capitalism. And it seems to me that this is just another toxic effect of the needs of capitalism for all of us to just be on all the time, working at maximum capacity.
Yeah.
And when you're not doing that, you're consuming the content, you're buying the goods.
I think the main thing is it's unregulated capitalism. It's like it's capitalism that just doesn't have enough guardrails. It just doesn't have enough regulations. Like, so much of this could be solved with just smarter regulations, like the 4-day work week, allowing your workers to have more breaks throughout the day, like understanding that if they're going to daydream, they're actually going to be more creative and more productive. Understanding that when they're taking time off, that it's going to be better for your bottom line.
Yeah,
that it's not at loggerheads with profits. So I feel like this is why it's sort of it's kind of interesting. Some people have said to me, like, oh, isn't the corporate world going to be angry with you because you're telling people to take more time off? And it's like, well, if they read the book, they'll understand that I'm actually helping them.
Yeah.
So they're actually going to make more money if they just let their workers, like, be more human and
not die in the process. Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting for some any phone calls from the corporate world. I think that'll be a while.
Yeah, you're not going to be invited into the inner sanctum anytime soon, by the sound of it. But the
doubtful.
People will have your back, man. Oh well, Joseph, I better let you go. On the very note of rest, it is a Sunday, and I know you've got a young son you probably want to go and hang out with and daydream and play with. So I'm going to let you go and do that.
Yeah.
thank you so much for squeezing us in. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no, thank you, James.
We've got to give a quick plug for the book, which I encourage everybody, which I know that they're going to have to listen to this conversation, to rush out and grab immediately. The Brain at Rest by Dr. Joseph Jebelli is out now, and it is available everywhere you get your books. Joseph can also be found online at drjosephjebelli.com. Joseph, thanks again, man. I really appreciate it. And best wishes with everything. And thanks for everything you're doing to make all of our lives a little bit better as well.
Thanks so much, James.
Not at all, brother. We appreciate you, man. Keep doing your thing. We'll speak to you again soon. Thank you, man.
You too. Take care. Bye, man. Bye.
Dr. Joseph Jebelli, ladies and gentlemen. Standing ovation or what? Man, did I enjoy that conversation. You know what? I would love to work in the sciences. What a fascinating life that must be. But instead, I chose rock and roll. Dude, that was a great chat. I love that stuff. And I've learned so much in that half an hour there that I'm still kind of processing. You know what I mean? I'm going to have to go back and listen through it all again and take some notes and apply it to my life, because that guy was dropping some knowledge, man. It's just so many aspects to what he was talking about there, you know, like the social and the cultural stuff that we're dealing with overwork and constant content saturation. And that's one whole area in and of itself. But the stuff you were saying about the effects that just stopping and just staring at the window or going for a walk and just being still for 5 minutes can have on your physical brain size and ability to process things and come up with new ideas and to function healthily and to not develop all sorts of ailments and premature aging. I mean, dude, come on, it's right there. You know what I mean? That this is proven in studies. It's not a theory, it's a fact. So, man, we've all got to find ways to get some more rest in our lives. And he's not even talking about long amounts of time either. You know, a half an hour nap or just, 5 or 10 minutes here and there to just close your eyes and switch off for 5 minutes or get out the house or the office for 5 minutes. I don't think that's a big ask. So an immediate takeaway for me, I guess, is something that I'm guilty of as well, is that when I do have 5 minutes, the first thing I do is I start just, hey, I'll go and check my Facebook, I'll see what's going on in the world. And I think that if we just stop doing that and resist the urge to go and pick up your phone and just stare at the window and see what's happening in the street, just let your mind do its own thing for 5 minutes. I think that could be a massive, massive thing that we could all do that is so easy right away. But hey, I'm just spitballing right now because I'm just reeling from the conversation, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And I really hope that you guys enjoyed it too, and I hope that you're going to get some benefit from that. And I really hope that you're all now going to rush out and buy The Brain at Rest by Dr. Joseph Jebelli. There are also tons of other interviews with the man himself on YouTube and across all the other podcast platforms. And he's done a bunch of other books as well, so go and check it all out. And in keeping with the theme of today's conversation, I'm now going to clock off and let you guys clock off as well and go and steal a few minutes of nothingness time. Do it. And once you've done it, get your ass back here and click that goddamn subscribe button or I'm coming after you. I'll be back next week with another fascinating chat with another awesome human. And in the meantime, as I always say, take care of yourself, take care of each other, love you loads.